Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is our Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting for November 4th, 2019. I'd like to call our meeting to order. First item is to approve the minutes for the August 5th and October 7th meeting. Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Number 3, items for consideration. 3A is street resurfacing projects.
Good morning. Once again, we want to thank you for your participation on the board. The month of October continued to be productive, with the City Council finally accepting several more street resurfacing projects and various sidewalk and trails projects moving closer to construction completion. Today, Brock will present 2 resurfacing budget revisions for your evaluation, and Lakeisha will offer a new list of school sidewalks. In addition, Lydia Leslie from Kimley Horn will present an overview on this Stockyard Street Enhancement project. We have referenced it in the past, but Brock's update on resurfacing will also include the first budget closeouts for projects that have been completed and accepted. The first 2 slides are intended to demonstrate how the status of the major categories in the sales tax program will change with your affirmative actions to staff's recommendations. In particular, please note the 81% allocation rate for arterial resurfacing and 90% rate for residential resurfacing on the initial slide. After approval of the budget closeouts, those rates fall back to 71% and 86% respectively, allowing you increased, or if you will, renewed funding capacity to approve future projects in the 2 resurfacing categories. And with that, I will introduce Brock Miner from Public Works to lead the discussion on Section 3A, street resurfacing.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning. This brings us to 3A1, the status update of the resurfacing projects. We always start with our status map, and this just shows the over 113 projects that this board has approved throughout the city, the 94 arterial street resurfacing projects, and the 19 residential streets. And each month we complete more projects, and we see that fewer projects are in design. There's several that are complete, and then more in construction, and then we'll go over the 36 projects that we're going to close out and just show some of the completions that we have. This is just another graphical representation of what Mike had already showed you in the other graphs. It just shows that the split between the arterial and the residential resurfacing. It shows that the 60% of the $168 million for street resurfacing is right at $100.8 million, and we've approved approximately, 91%, and that will go down with some of the projects that we turn back today. And then the residential resurfacing is the 40% of the $168 million, which is right at $67.2 million, and we've approved allocations of $58 million, which is right at the 90%, and we'll also return a little bit of residential resurfacing as we recommend closeout of some projects. And that brings me to my show and tell pictures. Last week I brought you Ann Arbor, Northwest 23rd to Northwest 36. Most everything was construction pictures. I showed some concrete repairs, some patching. I even showed the inner layer, and then I showed one side of the street with the base course of asphalt already on it. And so today I'll bring you a few slides of the finished product with the finished striping and everything complete on that project. So some good slides there of a finished product. My next show and tell picture is a residential neighborhood that is mostly comprised of concrete paving. There's a small portion of asphalt, but the majority of those streets are concrete paving. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll evaluate those panels, and if that panel of concrete is shattered or it's faulting or separating, then, from the joints or any of the cracks, then we'll go in there and replace and repair that. And that's what this picture shows, is an area that we've seen some damaged panels, and we've gone in and fixed those panels. Here's another project just showing a freshly poured concrete panel replacement in that area. And that brings me to my next residential resurfacing, Hefner Road to northwest 122nd Council to County Line. This particular project had several streets that needed full reconstruction and other streets that were able to be milled and overlaid, but this particular street was one that needed full reconstruction, so we'll go in there and we'll tear out that asphalt, compact the subgrade, and this one we brought in ag base, and you can see that they finished the ag base. And then in this picture is a picture where they have finished the ag base and they've put the base course of asphalt on it, so hopefully next time I'll be able to bring some finished product pictures of this neighborhood. Here we have one of our more rural arterial streets, and it was Air Depot from northwest, 164th to 179th. And it's a full reconstruct on this particular, and this is just some good pictures showing kind of the existing conditions and how bad they were. Here we have a lot of, wheel rutting and shoving of the asphalt, and so those areas have been patched already, and we definitely needed to get in there and finish that out. So here's kind of a picture where they have finished tearing out all the asphalt, they've stabilized the sub-base, and it's ready for the base course of asphalt. And here we have the base course of asphalt. We always try to wait to get the finished product pictures as late as we possibly can and still get everything in the agenda on time, so you'll see a couple of our finished product pictures that with some rain in there.
Quick question, Brock.
Yes.
What are the road widths for these? And I think I'm actually most interested in Ann Arbor.
A lot of times, and you can see that it's pretty narrow here, we always try to extend it to, as wide as we possibly can to still maintain the ditch and drainage areas. This particular one, I think we got it out close to 22 to 24 foot. I can verify that and get back to you if you need.
Thanks. My reasoning for Ann Arbor in particular is it's designated as a Tier 3 bike facility, and so I'm just wanting to double check what we're working with.
Okay, no, appreciate it. I can come back and tell you the finished product widths that we were able to achieve.
Brock, while you're on that slide, on the Air Depot, the red cedars obviously have taken that right away, the shoulder. Will those be removed as part of the process?
If they're obstructing to where we need to take those out, we will. I can verify that we did take those out. I can check on that, but if they're encroaching into the roadway and we need to tear those out to kind of get that 22 to 24 foot width, we will. We try not to do any more ditch work than we have to, but in some areas where the water is holding in the ditches and it's not flowing at all, we will do some ditch excavation and make sure we get positive drainage in that area. But yeah, there's a lot of cedar trees, and it looks like they're kind of pushing over into the road there.
Well, if you even cut them back a ways, they're going to come right back, and I would think they would affect the integrity of the surface after a period of time.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the good news is if you cut them at ground level, they don't come back.
Okay, yeah, no. I'll verify that we took those out, and if not, the ones that are encroaching, we'll definitely take that into consideration. The next project I have is a residential, more of a rural residential project that has the ditches, and you can see the cracks in the asphalt. There's even some kind of faulting and shoving going on there, and so some good before and after picture. Here we have an after picture where we came in and we have the base course of asphalt. We just need to finish the surface course. As you can see, the rain caught us again in that picture. I couldn't help myself, but there's another good picture of kind of before and after. So that project is turning out really nice. Hopefully, next time we meet, we can bring some finished product pictures there. And here kind of touches bases on exactly what we were talking about earlier. This particular project, Gemstone Acres, is kind of a rural residential subdivision, and it had a lot of ditch work that needed to be done, a lot of water that was holding in the work in the ditches, and eventually leads to the deterioration of the asphalt. And so we got in there and we were able to kind of smooth those ditches out and try to get positive drainage. And so here's kind of a before picture, and you can see the bad asphalt there. And here is an after picture of some of the ditch work that we're doing. And so that's kind of where we are on that. We're kind of milling and stabilizing that area, and hopefully we'll be able to get in there and finish and get some new asphalt. That brings us to item 3A2 and item 3A3 in your agenda. One is recommending some budget revisions, and the other one's going to be recommending the budget closeouts. I wasn't sure which one to present first, but I went with the budget revisions. And the reason for these, we have two projects here, Northwest 16th from Penn to May. This particular project was one that needs a lot of base repair and a lot of patching, more than normal. And so with the extensive patching, we need additional funds to properly address those patchings. And so we're requesting a little more money on that one. And then Southeast 44th from High to Santa Fe is unique. We actually have proper budget to finish that project, but it just has kind of connectivity and kind of that corridor aspect where it connects to a couple of things that we would like to address. There's two different sections. The first section is actually Santa Fe from Southeast 44th to 29th, which is already an existing sales tax project that this board has approved. The first 1,000 foot going really from Southeast 44th going north about 1,000 foot, it actually ties into Lightning Creek Bridge that we've recently done some revision or some construction on that bridge and done some updates. We also did some sidewalk repairs in that area, and there's also a park there. Draper Park is right next to it. But we weren't able to fit that 1,000 foot. It's all concrete, and we'd like to repair that. We weren't able to fit that into the approved Santa Fe 44th to 29 project that this board has already approved. And so we would like to catch it on this project and just kind of the corridor and the continuity, and we'd like to just add some funds to pick that portion up and fix that concrete panels that need to be replaced. The other section that we would like to address is actually on Southeast 44th, and it's from High to Eastern. You know, I-35 cuts right through there, but from High to I-35 is about 1,000 foot, and that area is actually, it ranks really high. It is a 2017 bond project, so as far as our prioritization, it's way up there high on the list, but that particular section of the road is just deteriorating really, really bad. And so instead of, continuing with maintenance costs, we would like to, while we're out there in this area, go ahead and get that 1,000 foot and have that nice tie-in to I-35. And so that's another area that I would like to address as we're out there and addressing this project.
So you mentioned that in particular section is one of the bond projects?
Yes.
And so we would be allocating sales tax to do it now and then take the bond money for something else later?
Correct, yeah. With our prioritization method is very close and similar to the prioritization method that the 2017 bond projects did, and so it always falls really, really high on our lists. So it's high on the list. We go out there and evaluate it, and if it can stand the test of time until the projected bond sale, then we'll skip past it and not recommend it to the board. But and I think this 1,000 foot portion is a lot worse condition than I-35 to Eastern is. And so I just thought while we're out there, it'd be a nice time to address it. But yes, this would be something that when those bonds are sold, they'll go out there and evaluate that street and see if there's any additional work needed on that. So if we don't have any more questions, which I'd be happy to answer any more, I think what we're doing is just asking for a vote to recommend approval of those budget revisions.
So I think I have one comment that I would, I guess, be remiss not to bring up, and maybe it kind of goes along with what Mr. Carfang was referencing, but I think that the challenge for me, and this, I think you make a good point, and I'm also a fan of doing work the smartest way possible. But it's always hard for me just because I know that there are a lot of competing priorities and maybe even a lot of opportunities with this particular program to sort of swap out bond projects because I'm not sure what will happen with so it's kind of like we're taking care of it today, and then we don't know what will happen actually, 10 years from now with how those funds will be used. And I don't think that process has the same sort of kind of impetus and structure as this does, as far as the balance of the different modes and methods that we're supporting with these dollars and the kind of projects that we're doing. So I feel like I have to make that comment since we're sort of going to take a vote on this, because that's always just sort of a challenge for me when looking at these kind of projects.
Absolutely.
Or these kind of revisions, I should say.
Hi, Debbie Miller with Public Works. I just want to point out this is just 1,000 feet. It's not the entire mile of the other projects that we have. And we are going to be returning some money in the next section that you'll see. So I just wanted to make that point for you.
It does help with economy of scale when people are out there and we can get that work done. But yep, my next request will be approving, turning back over $12 million back to the allocations that we can divvy up.
Are there any other questions for Brock? Need a motion to vote on this? Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay, that passes.
And that brings me to the next item 3A3, the recommendation of the budget closeout. I think we have a list here of 36 projects that we have final accepted and will go into the maintenance bond. And so there's actually 35 of these are arterial streets, and there's one residential neighborhood that we've closed out, and returning that money, which is over $12 million, back into the budget. That way, that does change, just like Mike's graph showed, it changes the percentages of our approval, and that'll put money back into arterial and residential resurfacing so that we can, recommend and approve more projects further down the line.
Move to recommend closeouts.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. That passes.
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Lakeisha in planning.
Good morning, Lakeisha Dunbar, Planning Department, Transportation Program Planner. This morning I will be bringing to you starting with item 3B, Street Enhancement Project Status Update. Just a reminder, we have approximately 50% of the projects are in design at this time. Not a whole lot has changed since our last meeting, but I will bring to you that for the 39th Street project, the preliminary report was received for review, and staff is continuing to communicate with stakeholders on the 15% design of this project. I believe you all recall the presentation that was done at the last few meetings. for the Paseo Walker area project. The consultant has received a survey for both of these projects, and they have started looking at ADA compliance for existing sidewalks and parking areas, and identifying locations where green infrastructure might be incorporated. And they've also began analyzing the possibility for a change in lane configurations on Walker that might accommodate bicycle facilities, bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And once they've identified some of the trouble areas, they will start coordination for meetings with stakeholders, with individual stakeholders in the area. On the Portland and Northwest 23rd and Northwest 36th project, a public meeting was held last week on Tuesday, October 29th. It was a very cold and rainy night, and so attendance was very low. But the key topics of discussion were locations for crossings. The consultant has identified 2 locations for a signal and mid-block crossing recommendations. And then a lot of conversation about sidewalk connectivity, concerns about connecting to the actual playground on the east side that's in the park, and some interconnectivity, and we kind of discussed some of that. I know as part of the street enhancement project, we won't be able to do much interconnectivity on the park side, but at least sidewalk along the edge of the corridor that could potentially connect to driveways that then could get people around to the actual playground. So that was one concern that was expressed at the meeting. And then the remaining projects, this is the essential status of these projects. Here, not a lot has changed, but we will have a presentation by Lydia Leslie from Kimley Horn on the Stockyards area status, and she will come at this time.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Yes, the Stockyards project. So we currently are, just to give you a brief thing, we currently have our survey that'll be completed this week, and so we'll begin our preliminary design. So talk a little bit about Kimley Horn. We're a national company. We have 4,000 employees over the nation. We are strong in transportation. We were founded by transportation designers in 1967. We invested in our Oklahoma City office 4 years ago, and we currently have 9 engineers in that office. I'm Lydia, and I'll be the project manager for this team. I'm a civil engineer, and I have a background in streetscape design as well. Other key players that will be working on this project is Pat Hart and Leah Campbell will be our landscape advisors on this project, and Luke Schmidt will be our traffic and ADA expert on this project. Kimley Horn, like I said, is a nationwide firm, and we have completed over 113 streetscape projects throughout the nation. Just to give you an overview of kind of the projects that we do, on your left you'll see the A Avenue project in National City, California. So this project incorporated lead things such as permeable pavers and also integrated some of the architectural features in the streetscape project. And then your one in the middle is more of a plaza area that we have created, and one in Durham, North Carolina is around the Durham Bulls. And so with that, we look at a plaza area for not only just gathering, but for also looking at potentials of doing photographs. And our local experience. So I have worked on the first project in Bricktown, the Bricktown Streetscape Project, and also the Chartel Streetscape Project. Our office is currently working on the Omni Hotel project and looking at the landscape components of that. And so I hope you all get to enjoy that soon, and also the pool deck there, as our landscape architects worked on that project as well. So delving down into the Stockyards area, you guys are all familiar that it's along Agnew Avenue and Exchange, and just south of the Oklahoma River. So like I said, we've just started our initial phases of design, so we have not yet had our stakeholder meetings. So we'll be looking to do that very soon. And with this area, I mean, I have learned a lot in being involved in this project about how the Stockyards functions. So we have the neighborhoods that we'll be meeting with, but we'll also have the 2 other large entities that have a vested interest and that would be the Oklahoma National Stockyards. And I was not aware of how intricate in working relationship the Stockyards has right now with our community, and that it still holds live auctions every Monday and Tuesday of each week. And as opposed to other stockyards in other major cities, some of those are not currently functioning stockyards. So we have a real pride in our stockyards community that this is a functional stockyards. And then we have the entity of the Stockyard City Main Street. And this would be all the partners in the area that own businesses in that area. They work with the Main Street USA project. And this would be the Langstons and the Cattlemans and all the people that are down in that area. So, you know, when I was looking through this and looking at their mission, it's to educate the public on history and preservation of the cultural and architect as it relates to the surrounding community, and to lessen the burden of the government and their activities. And this is done through local support and volunteerism. And so, you know, they're an integral part of this community. And we want to be aware of the events that they have when we're designing this project. The Stockyard Stampede is in October, and the Wines of the West is a major item as well as the items in Christmas with the Tree Lighting Festival and the Celebration Parade. So we're well aware of those as we delve into our design. So when looking at the design, the top right-hand corner shows you kind of a cross-section of what is happening on Exchange Avenue today. It's a 4-lane section roadway with parking and some pedestrian walkways. On your bottom right, this is the potential that it could have with making it more of a street narrow crossing by going to a 3-lane section with multi-use trails on each side of that, and in key areas having bump outs with potential for some art features in those. On my left, we show some of the work that we've done in some other projects, and that would be similar to what may be a potential in the future for the Stockyards area, for a gathering port, for a photo op, things of that nature to make people want to come down to the Stockyards. So looking at this, my slide didn't show everything, but what we're wanting to show is that the staff programmed for it to be more connectivity. We need sidewalks in the area. We want to have an equestrian trail access, and we want to have safety for the pedestrians, and key focus being safety for the pedestrians in that area. The blue indicates in this slide the existing areas of sidewalk. The yellow are the proposed for this project areas of sidewalk, and the green is the equestrian access for the sidewalk. So talking a little bit about the existing sidewalks that are there, there's a good base there as far as, the creativity and the artistic with the pavers and the connectivity along to the river area. And there's also some art there. There is some limited landscaping in the area, and there are some wide street crossings. There's also lighting that is currently in the area, and we want to expand on that in this project. You see on the left-hand side screen, there's also a nice bus drop-off. So all of those elements that we want to continue on through our next phase. So looking at this phase of the project, these are our proposed areas. And you'll see in the bottom left-hand of your screen some of the existing features in the sidewalk is, decrepit sidewalk that is not good to travel on for pedestrians and for ADA sake as well, and wide driveways. So we'll be looking at putting in new fresh sidewalks with a 5 to 6 foot path at the minimum, making sure they're safe for ADA and adding ramps where needed, and also adding the lighting features. So looking at this a little further, this is an example of an area that has that wide drive. So for this area, we'll be narrowing down the drive per code, working with the stakeholder on that, providing a new driveway, and also providing that ADA pathway through there. And the top right picture shows an example of where they do not have current ADA ramps, so we'll be making those as well. And the access to the river, that's a main focus as well for the Stockyards. Since this is programmed for having an option for the horses to be able to take your horse on the river, we'd love for them to be able to come back on the road too and be able to come in the Stockyards area. So we'll be creating sidewalk paths through here. Well, looking at our schedule, we have currently, like I said, started the survey. Our preliminary report will be due the end of January, and then we'll be reviewing and finalizing that, and then we'll be beginning our final plans, and those are due the end of June, and then we'll be reviewing that and working with Public Works, and then we'll start our bidding in September. And so we focus on having the stockyards construction started in October. And like I said, we want to be aware of all their events they have, and the first event we need to focus on is the Stockyard Stampede, which is in October. So we'd like to start the construction after that event and then have it continue on until the end of April of 2021. And through that, we would be working with the stakeholders so they can maintain their events and we can phase the project so they can still have the Christmas items that they need to have. And then the project should be completed before they have the Wines of the West. So with that, I'd open up to any questions you may have.
I got this question actually might be more for staff, but I was intrigued when you were speaking to the accommodations, I guess, for equine, for horse riding, that kind of things that is being considered. And so I'm much more familiar with this in much less densely populated areas, like in further eastern Oklahoma. But what are the guidelines around horse riding in regards to how that interaction with streets versus sidewalks versus trails? Because it sounds like we were talking about a lot of sidewalks, but I guess but I also get the impression that we're trying to make sure those are set up to accommodate horse riding from the river as well.
Well, I'll tell you what I know, and if staff wants to speak, they can. Now, we are promoting sidewalks along Young Avenue, and that will not be a horse facility. That's just sidewalks. But the horses may be traveling down on the roadways. There are some surfaces that you can do for a horse if that's desired to make it where it's less slippery in some areas. But being a multimodal, like the bike facility, that is a place where the horse could be away from the traffic.
Good morning, Doug Cupper, Director of Parks and Recreation, for the record. River Park, right there on Agnew, has been dedicated as an equestrian park. All other activities have been postponed, normal park activities, athletic events, and things along those lines. It's our intent to hopefully eventually allow horse trail riding along the river trail system from this area at Agnew all the way down and hopefully into the Native American Center at the far eastern end of the river. What we're alluding to in this project is the stockyards are creating an opportunity for traveling horse owners that are bringing their horses through Oklahoma City to actually have hotel-like events or accommodations in the stockyards. And what we're hoping to do with this project, as well as others, is to be able to facilitate those horses being able to get from the stockyards onto the trail system and over into the equestrian park. So there will be a necessary crossing of Agnew, and what's the safest way that we're trying to accommodate that. We are working with the stockyards to look at, they have access from the stockyards down to the river trail due north of the stockyards. They own property that goes all the way down there and then back over to the park element. We are still in designs. There's a lot of activities that will have to be dealt with, excuse me, at those pinch points where you go onto the bridges of the roadways to go that full distance. We will have to have horses on the same pathway as bicyclists and pedestrians and then separate them again. So there's a lot of engineering that will have to be done in the future. It's just in this environment to get them to the equestrian park. We want to make sure we explore all opportunities to get horses. We are the horse capital of the universe, and we want to make sure that people coming through, especially that stop in the stockyard area, can actually get their horses out and get them exercised or drinks. We actually foresee River Park becoming one of those stopover places, kind of a roadside rest, if you will, that the traveling horse caravans can pull off the interstate, get into the park, offload their horses so that they can exercise for those long hauls that they have. So that's kind of the game plan, but a lot of work has to go in, and I applaud them and the planning staff for thinking about the equestrians and being able to cross Agnew and get into Equestrian Park. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but I hope that take care of
That's a really good answer. I know there have been a lot of conversations, so it's really good to hear the coordination and some of the foresight taking place, because I do think as we start to look at how these facilities sort of interact, I mean, between the fairgrounds, the river, the stockyards, I think it's a great economic opportunity also, but it also speaks to the cultural sort of connections for a lot of folks that I know, so in rodeos and things like that. So having this, I think, is a big deal. So I'm happy to hear that we're sort of coordinating the thought behind it. That's what I was curious about. Thank you.
Thank you.
So on your vision slide, just a couple of notes, and I know you're still early in the planning stages, but I did notice diagonal parking followed by bike lane, followed by travel lane, and that diagonal parking can present a visibility challenge for people backing out of parking spaces. So perhaps consider swapping the bike lane on the other side to be a parking protected bike lane, or consider parallel parking with a buffer for the door zone.
This slide you're referring to?
Correct.
So you would have a preference for the bike lane to be on the other side of the parking?
Correct. And possibly still grade separated from pedestrians. But yeah, that I can also see an argument for having the bike lane on the traffic side of parking to support potential equestrian travel. But in that case, parallel parking in a buffered door zone would be safer.
There is another engineering company who will be working on reducing those lanes and restriping that, so that's out of my context, but I'm sure that's something that we can consider talking forward with all the partners.
Just to comment on the presentation, I think this is the most complete we've had on any of the streetscapes. And so if you're this far along early on, I can only imagine how fine the product will be at the end.
Thank you.
I have a safety concern where, brief period of my life, I decided I could break horses. Worked out the other way around. But when you put a large animal by trail users where they will be sharing the trail, I have a safety concern for both.
Yes, and I have looked into that a little bit, and looking at Arizona is a very area where they do a lot of equestrian trails, and they mix them with the automobiles and things like that. So there are different aspects we can do in design as well. And like Doug said, I mean, this is early in the design, so I think we'll be working through all those items on the equestrian end.
Will you provide garbage sacks for those folks to clean up after their animals? Gotta ask it. Big sacks.
That'll probably be something they'll have to consider, is how to maintain, yes.
Would that come, Doug, would that be a parks maintenance issue multiple times a day, I would guess?
It's amazing the topics that I have to deal with standing at this podium over the last 3 or 4 months. As always, we want to be cognizant. And like I said, the only time that we hope that we have the close proximity is at the pinch points where we all have ridden both the north side and the south side of the river trail system. We know we go under roads. Obviously, we have right-of-way. We can keep the horses off the pavement in most cases. It's where they have to go under those bridges that we have to have appropriate signage. We also have to look at all of the bridges that go over the tributaries, because they are not horse-friendly bridges at this point in time. So again, we have a lot of engineering that has to go into this, but we want to make sure that we can connect our equestrian park with the Native American Museum and all of the improvements that the Chickasaw Nation and the rest of the nations are going to be doing down in that environs. We want to make sure that we at least try to think about that flow. We anticipate the possibility of having a contract with a livery organization, somebody that actually provides horses at the locations, and then they will be obligated to keep the trail system as it is clean. It will fall under the Parks Department to manage that contract, that agreement, through the River Redevelopment Authority. But again, a lot of work has to go into it before the first horse actually leaves the equestrian park and travels on any of these trails. We've got a lot of work to go through, a lot of funding that has to be dealt with as well. But we want to make sure that they can get from the stockyards to the equestrian park. Beyond that, it's a long-term situation, and we aren't there at this point in time. But we will have to clean up one way or the other. Just like we have rules about cleaning up your dog, we know how that goes too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that completes our agenda items 3B, 1 and 2. Are there any questions on street enhancement projects at this time? Any additional questions? So we will move on to item 3C, Sidewalk status update. Just a reminder on our downtown sidewalk projects, the consultant is continuing to identify locations for the sidewalks, so they have a prioritized list that they've been working with, and they've been scoping those locations and doing budget estimates and aligning the costs for the work that would be associated with those. They will come back to us with a recommendation. So on the other projects, we've allowed them to go on and proceed and do establish work orders. On the downtown area, we want to review those sidewalks, the recommendations there, before they issue any work orders on that. Make sure that our stakeholders have an opportunity to comment on any concerns or any areas that we may have omitted that would need additional consideration. For the park areas, the Sellers Park area is complete, and the Denison Park area is complete, the construction of the sidewalks in those areas. The Woodson and DeLisi parks are still under design at this time. And just a reminder that we added last month Pied Piper Park, Britton Park, and E.W. Perry Park, and this took us up to about 98% of the funds allocated for the park area type projects. For the pedestrian area projects, the Windsor area is 99% complete, and the Stockyards area is about 80% complete under construction. The Southwest 29th Street area is substantially complete at this time, and the MLK/23rd Street area sidewalks are about 20% complete. Last month, we added Northwest Expressway, Windsor, Penn 44, and Southwest 29th areas, and that took us up to about 93% funded for the pedestrian priority areas. And what we have here in the photographs, on the right side, this is the Prospect Street project. This was the project that the board allowed to be added to the original list of projects. It's adjacent to the Thelma Reese Parks Elementary School, and so construction has commenced with it on this area. And the photo on the right is looking north up Prospect Street. This is kind of at the edge of the school property where the existing sidewalk is. And then the photograph on the left is looking south back towards the school and kind of at the first driveway of the first neighborhood driveway just north of the school area. So you can see it's pretty steep going through here, and it's just amazing to see the movement of the ground. I didn't get a good picture of where they may have to do a little retaining wall through here also. So the transit area sidewalks are about 30% complete. Last month we added 3 projects, the I-240 at Southwest Western area, the North Lincoln at Northeast 42nd, and Northwestern at Northwest Britton Road. And this took the transit area sidewalks up to about 93% funded. The other transit area sidewalks, Angie Debo Elementary, moved ahead. So what we have here in the photographs are the area on Northeast 36th Street, just east of Kelly. So progression is underway there. The photo on the left is looking west towards Kelly. You can see here some of the constraints that the sidewalk has with the electric pole on the right side, and then the border for that's the border for the landscape area at the marquee for the shopping plaza. So you can kind of see how the contractors have had to maneuver the sidewalk to evade those issues. The photograph on the left is just a little bit further west of this location here, just a little bit further, closer to 36th Street. It's kind of hard to see, but I thought it interesting here in this photograph how one of the challenges, they had to take the sidewalk through 2 guide wires for a utility pole. And so I think that's a little constraining, and so just some of the constraints that the contractors are having to work through in getting the alignments for the sidewalks in these areas. And so this is a segue to our status of our school sidewalks. The existing sidewalks projects that were funded or previously funded, the Angie Debo Elementary School and the Northridge Elementary School, those projects are complete. The Prairie Queen Elementary School area is about 90% complete, and the Highland Park Elementary School is about 5% complete. And so, as we brought to you last month, the recommendation for funding additional sidewalks in the other 3 areas, we are ready to bring back to you a recommendation on increasing allocation of funds for the school areas. We needed a little more time to kind of do the analysis for the school areas. And so of the projects that are under construction, underway, we've allocated 47% of the funding. So these were the projects that were originally funded. What we're bringing to you today is the additional list that would take the school area up to 94% funded. And this would include about 6 new school areas consisting of Ralph Downs Elementary School, Southern Hills Elementary School, Washington Irving Elementary School, East Lake Elementary School, Harvest Hills Elementary School, and Mustang Valley Elementary School. And this is a map of the area around the Ralph Downs Elementary School, kind of showing you the connectivity that the sidewalks would provide. You can see in the dark lines, those are existing sidewalks. The green lines are also existing sidewalks that were produced by MAPS 3. And then you can see the connectivity where not only would the addition of sidewalks connect to Ralph Downs Elementary School, but it would also provide connectivity to Putnam City Heights High School, Putnam City North High School. With just the addition of the sidewalks, funding for these sidewalks, it would take the total allocation up to 55% funded. Here we have the Southern Hills Elementary School area. And again, you can see the connectivity that would be provided by the proposed sidewalks. It would also provide some connectivity to some transit stop areas. With the addition of the funds for this area, it would take the total allocation up to about 65% of the funds. This is the Washington Irving Elementary School area. You can see there's really great connectivity for this school. The dark lines, again, being where existing sidewalks are. So this is just really filling in the gaps to get directly to the elementary school. With the addition of these funds, it would take the allocation up to about 69% funded for this, for the school areas. The East Lake Elementary School, this is the map here, and again, this is another area that looks to be well connected with sidewalks, and so we will be providing connectivity along the arterial here on Southwest 134th. The allocation of these funds would then take the total funds up to 74%. And here's the Harvest Hills Elementary School area and the connectivity that this project would provide. The allocation, if approved, would take the total funds up to about 83%. And last, the Mustang Valley Elementary School area will take the allocation up to 94% for all sidewalks. So with the approval of these sidewalk school areas, with the approval of these 6 school area sidewalks, the total approved for all sidewalk categories will increase again up to 94%, leaving about a cushion of about $1.3 million. And I just want to make a note that the consultant has informed us that they are utilizing full capacity of the budgets on these projects. They are having to tap into the contingencies for the school areas, pretty much on all the sidewalk areas. They're having to tap into the contingencies, so the budgets are being utilized fully. So at this time, staff is requesting the board to vote to recommend the 3 new lists of projects for funding. Recommend, sorry, it's actually 6, the 6 school areas. So at this time, staff is recommending the board to approve the new list of school sidewalks.
Questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions first. With regard to Ralph Downs and with East Lake, I know the Bike Walk OKC master plan mentions the idea of cut-throughs to improve accessibility to schools, and I noticed those 2 schools in particular had a lot of cul-de-sacs in the adjoining neighborhoods where kids have to walk all the way out of the neighborhood to the arterial to then get to school. Would it be under the sales tax purview to potentially examine cut-throughs as an opportunity for connectivity enhancement rather than just sidewalks on the arterials?
I'm not as familiar with once the developments have occurred, so the challenge is working with the property owners to get to obtain those cut-throughs. So to answer your question initially, that yes, we could now analyze some opportunities. We could look at that. There was one school,
I think John may have actually explicitly called out East Lake as an example.
East Lake actually has one.
Oh, good.
Yes. When we were reviewing these projects, East Lake actually has one. Sure. And it exists approximately either here or here. So it does have one on the west side. So we didn't observe one on the east side, but it does actually have one on the west side. I've been told that there's one on the northeast corner. I'm not sure how we would coordinate that now that there's development. I know that going forward is the plan for the planning department, especially as we review our code update to look at opportunities where we could encourage developers to make sure that those connectivities are made during the development stage. This kind of after the fact, I need to confer on exactly how we'd be able to coordinate those.
Then another question, as far as crosswalks go, is there an opportunity to look at raised crosswalks rather than bringing the sidewalk down to road level, just to provide extra visibility to the pedestrians and an additional traffic calming measure?
It is not the purview of this particular program to do that. We can look at opportunities when requests are made. There are areas where we would have to go through Traffic Commission and make recommendations. And typically, if we want to do a raised crosswalk, it would take a traffic study to conduct that. So it could take some time, but we haven't identified any locations. We do look at that when requests are made from residents.
Okay. I do know of a couple of incidents of pedestrian auto crashes over the past year where that would have been helpful. So just something to keep in mind.
Question, Keisha, the original budget that we set for sidewalks was, I believe, $24 million.
Yes.
With the approval of the recommended additions today, of that $24 million, what would be left?
About 1.3 million would be left.
That's what was left.
Yes.
So we basically have completed what dollars we had originally then.
Yes. We tried our best to kind of keep it at least 5% cushion, so that if there are anything that come up, we'd have an opportunity to rely on.
I was going to ask on that note, since sales tax collections seem to be above projections, what's the formal plan for allocating that extra funding?
Staff plans to bring back recommendations in the springtime on how those extra collections would be used.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? All right. The movement on this, motion on this. Second. It's been approved. I'm sorry. Need to vote? Hasn't been approved. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Passes.
Thank you. So that completes the discussion on item 3C, sidewalks. If there are no additional questions on sidewalks, I'll be moving to item 3D1, bicycle facility status update. So I'd like to remind you that 100% of these funds have been allocated for 11 bike projects. Not a lot of movement has occurred since our last meeting, but we like to report that the consultant has submitted more thorough budget analysis on pretty much all of these projects, and we're continuing to work on the walker striping plans, and Public Works is working with manufacturers and vendors on types of green paint and delineators that we would like to add as part of our unit price contract and for installation. We've been comparing notes with our local peer cities on their installations and practices with the green paint and delineators. And we'll be looking for opportunities to do some test sections. We found some areas in comparison that there's some failure of some types of green paints and delineators, so we want to make sure that we do the best we can at trying to provide something that's effective for our bike facilities. In the coming months, staff will bring forth recommendations for modified budgets for some of these bicycle facilities, and the modifications will be mostly due to the need for resurfacing, road resurfacing in some areas, or most areas, and then accounting for the additional costs for paint, for the green paint, and for delineators. Are there any questions on bicycle facility projects? This is pretty much the status report for bicycle facility projects.
I had one question. This is way out of my purview and area, but kind of speaks to something that was brought up last time, was about a change in rulings or laws about something to do with bicycles. We've got, well, if we have these delineated green sections, do we have any signage explaining to those novices who don't know what that means along the roadway? I mean, they may say, isn't that pretty, they painted the sidewalk green or the pavement green, but I'm just saying it seems like it would be obvious, but not necessarily so.
Staff is looking at, and the consultants will be providing signage plans along with all of our designs for all projects. If you're asking for existing locations, those we do not have any out there, and we can coordinate with MUTCD on what signage we could utilize to inform the public on the best how to interact with the green paint. We do plan to have an education campaign. We're working on that. We don't have a time frame just yet, and we hope to include things like that, explanations on what the different symbols and markings represent, and how we'll put that out, and it be multiple media opportunities. So through websites, hopefully we're considering maybe potentially doing some PSAs and things like that. So, but we haven't decided on that yet. But so we do plan to have an education campaign to be able to explain how to interact with our lots of new bicycle facilities.
It's interesting when looking at these projects, you realize that for generations we have basically planned all of our communities around vehicular travel and not having to do with pedestrians or bicycles. And it's a huge change in the direction of development, and we have so much development going on, but from here on out, that's going to be so much more of a factor than it's ever been before. But this seemed like a silly question when I asked it, but obviously you're addressing it, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And just to follow on with that, the last couple of times I've ridden down Walker, there's always been a motorist who pulls over into the bike lane to make a right turn, which, depending on what state you're in, is fine and good guidance, but I'm not sure what the standard's going to be here. I do know it was I think a decade-long effort to get one question added to the state driving exam for bicycles, and it's probably due time to add a few more. So that would be one initiative to go, but I think that's more of a state-level perspective.
Depending on the location, to address your question about motorists turning into the bike lanes, we have been working through our bike design standards to identify opportunities where we could potentially install delineators at boxes, depending on the type of intersection, to help kind of slow down motorists and encourage them to, make a full angled turn instead of angling across the bike lanes. So we have identified that as an issue. We've also identified the issue of motorists driving through the bike lanes. And so we are trying to implement some design standards that would help hinder that when possible.
Yes, I did notice that when there is a bus stop, there is like a dashed line that indicates that there will be some mixing between cyclists and vehicles, which I think is really nice. And certainly in certain sections where people do need to cross the bike lane, having those dashed lines I think is really nice as a signifier for cyclists as well. But yes, I did notice that the Walker Trail is missing like the social cue that you're talking about. I didn't see like anything that said it was a bike lane. And I'm also concerned about bike lanes ending, which I did bring this up at the last meeting that we had. And they said that on the northern section of Walker that it would be eventually connected to further bike facilities. So there was no signage saying the bike lane was ending. But on the southern end of that Walker section, there is no signage saying that the bike lane is ending. And it immediately drops you into a 40-mile-an-hour lane with vehicles. And I'm concerned about that there, and also just any time a bike lane is ending, having clear signage that it's going to come to an end so people can do what they need to do from there. One that really concerns me is on Sheridan and Broadway. A bike lane ends, and there's no signage saying that it's going to end, and then when you keep going straight forward, you become parallel with the tracks, the streetcar tracks. So that one is like a very dangerous one where you think you can just keep going, but you're immediately with the tracks. So,
okay. So to address, I'm sorry, are you? Okay. To address the Walker project, reminder that we are still working on the striping plans for that, and that does include the signage that would go along with that. So obviously no signage has been installed at this time, but there is a plan for signage for the Walker project. And that will indicate those cues for when lanes are dropped and transitions. And backing up to the bus crossover, yes, we call those conflict areas, and we try to identify where there will be transitions and conflict areas where motorists and cyclists may need to cross. And so those will be indicated by skip lines. And it is an intent that eventually that we would have green skip lines, green blocks of skip lines to highly identify those conflict areas. As it relates to the Sheridan and Broadway project, I'm sorry well, I want to go back to the Walker project, and just a reminder too, that was a project that we did kind of get added at the last minute. So the plans were kind of being done as the striping was being done. It was an opportunity where we could get it, could coordinate efficiencies with the resurfacing project that was going through there. So that's why the plans aren't complete, and that's why the signage hasn't been installed as part of the completion of some of the other striping projects, portions. I'm sorry, I don't have a response for the Sheridan and Broadway project. That was done by another division, and we had not coordinated efficiently on making sure the signing has been complete for that project. But thank you for the comments, and we'll make sure to take it in consideration, or at least attend to it.
I think with regard to the general Pershing project, back in August, it may have been, we looked at one of the initial designs, and if I recall, we did not end on consensus for the design. So I was wondering when we might be re-examining that.
The consultants are continuing to work on it at this time, so I don't have a status as to exactly when we'll complete that. We do know that we will be striping phase 1. I'm sorry, I don't recall the conversation about consensus, so if you could remind me, I might could be able to provide an answer later.
Yeah, I think, so in the Bike Walk Master Plan, General Pershing is designated as a Tier 1 facility, but I think the discussion back in either July or August presented a design where, for one reason or another, it was just a painted bike lane without buffers, which would be a Tier 2 facility. And so the drop in tier for being a strong connection between downtown and the Will Rogers Trail, especially for being one of the first projects to finish as part of the sales tax, putting our best foot forward, did not seem like that was being the case.
So let me please remind everyone that Bike Walk OKC calls the tiers are recommendations based on preliminary analysis, looking at volumes and speeds and the existing cross-section. However, a lot of times when we get in the field, the actual configuration does not allow for us to accommodate the recommendations that the plan has made. So yes, it is our intent to try to get in Tier 1 facilities as much as we can. That is our preferred design. But there are a lot of locations when staff gets out in the field and observes the actual configurations without moving curb is a challenge sometimes to be able to continuity for a Tier 1 facility. And so we try to maintain that continuity as much as we can, but there are times where we will have to reduce and maybe potentially go down a level in design in order to maintain a full corridor project as the plan calls for. So I don't know if we've come to the particular location that you're talking about for General Pershing. If I'm pretty sure that if we could get a Tier 1, we would do a Tier 1, and so we'll look at it again and make sure that we are able to accommodate that.
And for the record, with regard to the newest law on the books that started on Friday, mandatory lane changes on any multi-lane road. General Pershing in particular being 2 lanes in each direction with a major median in between. Right now, as a cyclist, taking up the very middle of the lane and telling other motorists very clearly that I am there and they have to change lanes to pass, I've got 11 feet of width. And especially with flashing lights, cars can't really miss me. So going to a 5-foot or less width Tier 2 facility is a huge loss in that regard. And so on a number of these projects, I feel like protected bike lane or nothing might be a better trade-off.
Thank you for the comment.
Will there be a time then when the consultants finish their work, our board as you're suggesting, would have an ability to vote, to say, we really feel it's a necessity, especially on General Pershing, which is going to be, I think, extremely well traveled. That's going to be the main link coming from the west into downtown Oklahoma City. I would think it would be prudent for the board to be able, if it's not a tier 1, to suggest, I think this is what you're saying, is it not, to say we would like to vote at a point, if it's not a tier 1, to make it into a tier 1.
We will definitely bring it back to the board.
Thank you. Any other comments?
If there are no more comments, thank you for all the comments on the bike section, status update, and I try to take notes and we'll review back to the minutes to make sure that we address all of your questions and concerns by the next meeting. If there are no other comments or questions about item 3D, we'll move on to item 3E, trail status update. And
just one last note, Lakeisha. I'm going to keep hammering on this until there's a great way forward. In particular, project number 2 on your numbered list, going up to the Deep Fork Trail along Independence and Grand. That's just one example that highly needs resurfacing the entire length of that bike route. And if the scoping and the budget are not there to provide at least patchwork, then adding paint is just going to infuriate drivers more that we're putting down paint for bike lanes that will not get used because of the surfacing. And that's just going to lead to more road rage and honestly kind of threaten my life while I'm riding out there because I'm not going to be in a bike lane where drivers think I should be because of the potholes.
thank you. Anything else on bike facilities? So we'll have Brock come back, and he will provide the status update for item 3E, trails.
Thank you. I'll do a quick update here of our trails. We're making a lot of good progress. We finished Overholster Trail. We had a final on Friday where we created a punch list, and hopefully we can finish out that punch list as quick as possible and get that project complete. We've started the Lake Hefner to Overholster Trail in construction. I didn't have any good pictures, but hopefully next time I can bring you some good pictures of the construction going on that trail. We're very close to getting the construction going on the South Oklahoma River Trail, and hopefully the north will follow short. We're making good design progress on the Katy Trail, and hopefully we can continue to have some good progress on all the trails moving forward. And that's really all the update I had on the trails before we get into the implementation plan update. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any.
So I know with regard to MAPS 4 coming to a vote pretty soon, there's been some contention over having a fully connected loop around the city, and without seeing the design of how the Katy Trail and the connectors around the Native American Cultural Center are going to go, in addition to having sales tax money and bond money to complete that network, the general public's perception of MAPS 4 being so heavily dedicated to protected bike lanes and not more trails is sort of a negative for voting for MAPS 4. So I think any material you can provide with regard to the design and the way that is proceeding will help alleviate some of that concern.
We'll look into that and take that into consideration. Thank you.
Can you update us? I know that area that's washed out on the, let's see, the West River Trail, where it goes along the river. I know there was a group looking at possible solutions to where the trail is closed, and wondered at the time frame.
We're still looking at options on either rerouting the trail or doing some bank protection, but there hasn't been a final decision made yet. So it's still being looked at. I don't have a schedule. Hopefully we'll have something soon, and we can report that back to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Brock, I know like our original budget was $12 million on trails, And of that, what has been approved, if you have that?
We have approved 91%. If you'll remember, we had 2 new trails, the Deep Fork, and then the Hefner Trail portion trying to connect in, and then we had, I think it was 11 of the existing trails being worked on, but we've approved 91% of that $12 million so far. So we have about 8 or 9% still left, and as we get further in design, if we have some overages, we'll bring that to you, and then if, just like in the resurfacing, if we finish under budget on those, then we're able to send more money back and we can reallocate that with new projects.
I know we continue to talk about safety and signage. Signage is going to be put on all the trails. Is that signage included in the 91%?
Yes. Yep. Each trail had the construction and then the signage approved with it, and then the new trails will include the signage.
Thank you.
So I had a question, mostly because I wanted to kind of clarify something that was said earlier. But I thought early on in this process, when we were looking at the trails and looking at the plan, that we were actually close, if not quite there yet, with completing the sort of original kind of Grand Avenue ring on the trail with the Trails projects. Is that not accurate? Did I misunderstand that?
I think that's accurate. I think part of that might be $9 million of bond funding supported with ODOT as well, though, and so it's not pictured here. Is that right?
Yes, we have several bond projects that will connect the Katy Trail to the River Trail and the Deep Fork to the Katy.
Yep.
We do plan to have a full loop, and we have several different projects that we're working on, and we can always get you a map.
No. I want to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding something, because I know early on in the process, it was probably very close to when we were really talking about what we were funding with the sales tax program. We were talking about that bigger picture and the fact that we were able to fill in some of the blanks that I think were existing there. So I just wanted to make sure that was still the case. That's all.
It is.
Okay. And I think that complete map, especially with the statement that bonds have to be dedicated the way they have been and are not flexible to be removed, will alleviate some of that MAPS 4 trail concern.
I think if you move the math forward, our group is using $12 million. There's future dollars to be spent of $9 million, which is coming from bonds. There's $8 million on the budget for MAPS 4. And there was a great hope that we could connect all the trails and add amenities. None of the trails in our city really have any amenities. Signage was certainly a huge needed situation, which that's going to be taken care of. But Sidewalks has a budget in MAPS 4 of $55 million. Unfortunately, trails only have 8, which doesn't do a great deal. So I think every dollar that we can direct into the multi-use trails, connectivity, and amenities is money well spent.
That's it. I'll turn it over to Mike, and we'll go to item 3F, implementation plan.
The November implementation plan includes the sidewalk projects recommended last month, as well as the resurfacing budget revisions, resurfacing budget closeouts, and the sidewalk projects recommended this month. Your action today will send the implementation plan to the City Council for their approval on November 19th.
Move to receive the November 2019 plan. I see this as 2 separate actions.
Can we do 2 motions? You want to do 2? Are you wanting to do 2 motions?
That's my recommendation, yes.
Would you repeat your first motion?
To receive the November 2019 plan.
Okay. That has been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? We still need a motion then to recommend it being, the plan being sent on to City Council. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Next is financial reports.
Good morning, Erica Vanderslipen with the Finance Department. I'm going to go over the Better Street, Safer City Tax Financial Summary as of October 29th. For the month of October, there were tax collections of $9,972,000. Total to-date revenues for the sales tax are $192.5 million, and interest from the sales tax of $2.86 million, for a total of $195,409,000. Overall revenue has exceeded original projections by $14,135,000, or 7.8% overall. We have current allocations for streets, streetscapes, sidewalks, trails, totaling $172.4, excuse me. And then total to-date expenditures are $48,184,000. Are there any questions?
Any questions? We need a motion. We need a motion to receive this. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Let's think about a Christmas party.
I think we're ready to talk about 2020 schedule. At our last meeting, Mr. Dixon asked about the status of the sales tax program and the future anticipated requirements for the board's participation. Although revenue collections end in March, we believe 2020 is going to be a busy year. Our local community has been blessed with a robust economy, resulting in revenue collections currently in excess of original projections. Our staff anticipates working with the board, perhaps in another workshop-type setting, to prepare a recommendation to the City Council on how those revenues should be allocated. We also saw today the impact and resulting opportunities created when projects are completed and closed out. And as they are more complicated from a design perspective, we are also just now starting to see the street enhancement and bicycle infrastructure categories start to gain traction and move forward. We expect you will have various preliminary reports, contract awards, and budget closeouts to approve in the coming calendar year. With that, we are proposing a 2020 calendar that looks much the same as the 2018 and 2019 versions, with a board meeting on the first Monday of the month unless that date falls on a holiday. And as always, meetings will be canceled when appropriate to be as efficient as possible with your time.
I have a question. If we end the program with the excess funds that's projected now, do those have to be allocated the same percentage on street surfacing and trails as the original budget, or is the board have freedom to allocate those at?
I think the board has the opportunity to recommend as they see fit.
Good question. Thank you.
Move to receive and approve 2020 meeting schedule.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. Motion passes.
And just as a follow-up, again, the input and the questions that you guys have for us are just incredibly helpful. helpful. We truly appreciate that. I did want to acknowledge a couple of things from previous meetings. We've had 2 citizens approach the board about potential sidewalk projects, and one of our board members has provided a list of possible street resurfacing projects. We do take those recommendations back to our staff for review and evaluation. In the case of one of the street resurfacing projects, it is currently being evaluated as an agreement with the county where we may pay for materials and they would provide the labor. We will have information on these and other questions available for the board as we move forward. And finally, we do not currently anticipate having a December meeting. We appreciate your commitment to the community as a whole and to the sales tax program in specific, and we hope you and your family have a blessed holiday season. We will look forward to seeing you guys after the first of the year.
Okay. Item 6 is director's report. No reports? Next are comments. First, 7A, comments from the board.
I've got a few. First, I want to thank the planning department and whoever else is involved with the sidewalk activities. So I know Lakeisha and Jeff and others have been involved with that. But on Prospect and in 36 in particular, for probably 20 years that I've been familiar with that part of 36th Street, there are trails beaten in the sides of in the curbs essentially from where people are walking back and forth. And so seeing sidewalks come through there and the speed and efficiency that's happened has been great, frankly. And then Prospect, I think the timing couldn't be better to get that addressed. And I know it wasn't easy, and I know I was probably quite difficult in bringing it up over and over again, but I appreciate you guys getting on it. And I also think that the neighborhood will appreciate it because as we start getting into inclement weather, those are the times when you see those kids having to walk down those those steep cuts, and traffic being less able to sort of navigate that, and so it's just a big deal. So I want to say thanks for that. A couple of other comments that I had is just in regards to the design for the bicycle facilities. I feel like it's worth mentioning just because it seems like we're getting to a point where those where that's kind of all come at us at once. That it might be a good idea at least that we maybe are able to engage a little bit more in the preliminary design of the first 1 or 2 facilities that are going to be proposed. I think there'll be some opinions about from the board, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I would hate for us to spend a lot of time going back and forth if we could sort of try and figure that out. I'm really curious about places like Pershing Avenue because we've increasingly located, especially with the boulevard and some other things opening, we've increasingly located a lot of the social services that the city provides in that area, in addition to being a terminus for the fairgrounds, et cetera. And so I just really think it provides us an opportunity for people who need to use bicycles and public transit as a means to get around. What we do there can actually set the course for what that looks like. So I just think it might be helpful. And then the third thing I wanted to mention, and it's a little bit of a broken record for me, but I think people are obviously starting to talk about maps, and obviously we won't meet again, so we'll hope that or at least people like me will hope that it passes and that we continue that momentum. But I think in thinking about what we will discuss in 2020 in regards to this program is going to, I just want to reiterate the idea of the difference between how this program has been set up, looking forward to what we would expect MAPS 4 to look like, and the bond process. And I think those processes are just so different that I have a lot more confidence in us being able to do meaningful, big things that will set good standards and set expectations for what the city will look like and for where we can go. We did that with the trails. I'm hopeful that we can do that with the bicycle facilities. And so at least to understand my point of reference when bringing up those comments, I'm really thinking about that with this, because I mean the bond projects historically have not had the opportunity to do those kinds of things. I feel like with this sales tax program we can do those kind of things, so it feels like it's at least my duty to make sure that we try.
And just a comment to staff, I appreciate all the hard work that goes on and the fact that you always seem to have an answer no matter how crazy the question we ask. It means that so much goes on behind the scenes that we only think about once a month, that you think about daily. And my evaluation of city staff is much stronger than it ever had been before, just because we've been here with you for 2 years now, and we thank you for that very much.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. A couple of Saturdays ago, we had a dedication on the trail, 14-mile trail around Draper Lake. The city put together, and Christy Yeager had done a lot of great work on that, and it was really validating to go out and actually be there and be part of that and see that, and also to recognize, I'm not familiar with all the cities in Oklahoma and the United States, but I do know that there is a wonderful working partnership between volunteers and city staff to make a difference. And we certainly have an opportunity to continue to do that as a result of this board. Thank you. Any other comments? Very good. Any comments from staff?
You mentioned 2 years. That shocks me, but I guess that's true, isn't it? Time flies. Just wanted to Mr. Thompson's comment, we feel like we're probably to a point where we can come with, well, probably some preliminary, correct me if I'm wrong, but some preliminary plans for the Main Street corridor, and also the design guidelines that we have developed that are in a pretty good draft form right now. So we can bring those to you in possibly January, or we could do kind of a workshop like we did before. So it's kind of, what is your preference in terms of format for that discussion? You don't have to answer now, but we're considering that. So if you have an opinion, feel free to email us, and we can kind of make that call depending on your preferences.
I, for one, would appreciate the workshop style, maybe some open ideas and open opinions from a broader source than just black and white in front of us.
Okay. Yeah, we'll plan on that then. Unless there are other opinions, we'll kind of explore that and see what that looks like, and we'll get back with you.
Any other comments from staff? Comments from citizens? Very good. Everyone have a safe week, and appreciate everyone being here. See you next year. We're adjourned.